He left me out of his will. So I read his diary at the funeral and exposed everything. There's a certain silence that only exists at funerals. It's heavy, awkward, a kind of breathless stillness where no one knows what to say. That's what filled the room when the lawyer read the last line of my father's will. My name never came up. Not once. I sat there in a pressed black suit, hands clenched in my lap, watching my half-brother Sam nod solemnly as the inheritance was split between him and two cousins who hadn't visited Dad in over a decade. Sam's wife squeezed his hand. My uncle patted him on the back. Everyone acted like this was how it was always supposed to be. No one even looked in my direction. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stared at the brass urn resting on the table near the altar, the one Dad picked out himself, in his usual precise fashion, months before he died of pancreatic cancer. He knew he was dying, knew every moment was a countdown, and he still left me nothing. Nothing, after 29 years of trying to earn so much as a nod of approval from him. Nothing, after holding his hand in the hospice room while he groaned through morphine hallucinations and whispered names of people long dead, none of which were mine. The service was held at his favorite church. Marble columns, stained glass, that old smell of incense and sorrow. I could barely breathe in there. People whispered condolences. I nodded, robotically. Then Sam stood up and gave a eulogy that sounded like a campaign speech, all about Dad's integrity, his legacy, and how he shaped the men we are today. I almost laughed, but I didn't, because in my pocket was the one thing Dad had left me, by mistake. A diary. He kept it in a lockbox in the basement behind shelves of old tax returns and war medals. He didn't know I had the key. Didn't know I'd found it a week before he passed, while looking for his power of attorney documents. It wasn't meant for me. That much was obvious from the first entry. He wrote to someone else, someone named Jay. At first, I thought it was short for Jack, his war buddy. But no, Jay turned out to be a woman. One he loved. Not my mother. Every entry was dated, detailed, obsessively neat. His handwriting always looked like it was printed from a typewriter, even as he was dying. And what those pages revealed made my hands shake. Dad had a second life. And in that life, I was a mistake. A product of an affair. A child he never wanted, but agreed to raise out of duty. The word hit like a punch to the gut. Duty. That's what I was to him. Not a son. Not even a burden. Just something he tolerated. He wrote about how my mother trapped him. About the night she got pregnant and how he never forgave her for it. About the shame of lying to his wife, Sam's mother, and pretending I was a distant cousin's child they'd adopted after a car crash. Except it wasn't just lies in ink. It was photos, letters, proof. My whole life. The questions I was too afraid to ask were sitting there, bound in brown leather, smelling of dust and old rage. I read every word. And when the funeral ended, as people made their way toward the reception hall, I stood up and walked to the podium. "Excuse me," I said, voice steady. "Before anyone leaves, I have something I need to share." Murmurs. Confused glances. Sam's face tightened. "This won't take long," I continued. "But I think it's time everyone knew who my father really was." And I pulled out the diary. You should have seen their faces. My mother, seated in the back row, went ghost pale. Sam's wife whispered something and tugged at his sleeve. But I didn't stop. I opened to a marked page and began reading aloud. An entry dated 15 years ago. "Jay, I saw him again today. He looks more like me than I care to admit. His mother keeps pushing me to act like a father, but I can't. Not truly. Because I know the truth, and he never will. He's not supposed to exist." The air shifted. It wasn't silence anymore. It was dread. No one moved. No one stopped me. And I wasn't done. Not even close. I didn't plan on reading the whole thing, just a few entries. Just enough to crack the image people had of him wide open. But when I looked up and saw Sam's face, that mix of smug panic, I knew I was going further than I meant to. "This is dated the week of my 10th birthday," I said, flipping to another page. "I remember that week. He canceled our fishing trip. Said he was too tired. Too busy. I cried for 2 days." I paused. Here's what he actually wrote that week. "Jay, the boy is starting to ask questions. I see her eyes in him, and it makes my skin crawl. I can't pretend much longer. I'm losing patience. Every time he calls me Dad, it's like a needle to the chest." Someone in the back gasped. Aunt Marlene dropped her biscuit on the floor. And still, no one stopped me. I closed the book for a moment. Let the weight of it settle in the air. My father was not the man Sam just described, I said. He was not full of honor. He was not a builder of men. He was a coward who hid behind duty and silence. Hey, Sam snapped, stepping forward. That's enough. No, it's not, I said, looking right at him. Because you always knew something wasn't right, didn't you? He flinched. You used to ask why we didn't look alike. Why I wasn't in the family portraits. Why your mom cried whenever I showed up for holidays. My voice rose. You always knew something didn't add up. But you didn't want to know. Just like everyone else here. I opened the book again and read one more line. If he ever finds out, I hope he's man enough to walk away and never come back. I'd respect that more than his blind loyalty. Then I looked around. Slowly. You all came here to honor a man who built his life on lies. And maybe you're okay with that. Maybe pretending is easier. But I'm done pretending. Someone muttered, this isn't the time. And I snapped. When is the time? When do I get to stop carrying a secret I never asked for? When do I get to stop wondering why my own father couldn't love me? Sam stepped closer. You're grieving. You're emotional. Let's just. No, I said. You got the house. The money. The estate. You got the legacy. All I got was the truth. And then I did something I didn't plan. I set the diary on the altar, next to the urn, and walked away. You can all read it, I said. Or burn it. Your call. I walked past Sam, past the guests, past my mother, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Outside, the air was cool. I didn't cry. Not yet. But inside that church, the mask finally cracked. And what was underneath wasn't grief. It was something worse. The beginning of something I couldn't take back. I didn't go home. I just drove. No destination. No playlist. Just the hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of my thoughts beating like war drums in my skull. I thought it would feel cathartic, exposing him like that. Reading his own words aloud. Watching the polished memory of him collapse like a house of cards. But all I felt was empty. Like I'd thrown a grenade into a room and walked out before the dust could settle. I pulled over at a rest stop off the highway. One of those half-forgotten places with a vending machine that eats your dollar and a bathroom that hasn't been cleaned since the Reagan administration. I sat on the hood of my car, watching semis crawl by in the distance, and tried to breathe. That's when my phone started buzzing. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, all from the same people who couldn't be bothered to look at me 5 hours earlier. My cousin Melanie, what you did today was disgusting. Uncle Dave, you should be ashamed. He's dead. He can't defend himself. Even Sam, who rarely texts me anything more than a passive-aggressive emoji, sent, this isn't over. You just embarrassed the whole family. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I shut the phone off. Because I didn't care if they were angry. I cared that not one of them said, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Not one. And the one message I was waiting for, the one I didn't think I'd ever get, came later that night, when I finally dragged myself back to my apartment. It was from my mother. A single line. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, come over. She arrived 20 minutes later. No makeup. No jewelry. Her gray hair pulled back tight, like she always wore it when she was scared. Or hiding something. She stood in my doorway, eyes red, but dry. I didn't invite her in. I just stepped aside. She walked in like she'd done it 1,000 times before, which she had. When I was little, back when we still did Sunday dinners, and she brought casseroles with names like funeral potatoes, even when no one had died. We sat at the table. No words. Just silence. Until she said it. It's true, isn't it? I didn't answer. She nodded like she already knew. I read the diary, she said quietly. After the funeral, I went back for it. Of course she did. She always went back for things. What did you expect to find? I asked. She looked up, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw it. Guilt. Thick and raw. I was hoping it wasn't about you, she said. That maybe he was writing about someone else. Another mistake. Another life. And when you saw my name? I asked. She flinched. I wanted to lie, she said. Even to myself. But I couldn't. Not after what you did. Her eyes met mine. I never told you, because I thought protecting you meant pretending. I laughed bitterly. Protecting me? You let me believe he was my father. You let me beg for his love. I know, she whispered. You let him ignore me. For decades. I know. You watched him punish me, emotionally, silently, for something I never asked for. She nodded, swallowing hard. I was scared, she said. I thought if I told you the truth, you'd leave me too. And there it was. The real fear. Not about protecting me. About being alone. Who was he? I asked, voice hollow. Her brow furrowed. You mean? My real father, I said. The man in the shadows of my life. The ghost I'd never known existed until a week ago. She didn't answer right away. Then she said the name. And my entire world tilted sideways. His name was Michael Harrow, she said. And the second those words left her mouth, everything inside me shifted. Michael Harrow. It meant nothing to most people. But I knew that name. Everyone in our town did. He was the man who vanished. The local scandal. The whispered rumor at barbecues and dinner tables. The guy who'd been dating a married woman and left town suddenly in the mid-90s, right around the time my mother found God and started dragging me to Sunday school in pressed shirts 2 sizes too small. He was the name people said with lowered voices, the kind of story dads shared when they were drunk and thought the kids weren't listening. That can't be true, I said. Michael Harrow disappeared. My mother closed her eyes. He didn't disappear, she whispered. He was forced out. I leaned forward, every part of me suddenly cold. What are you talking about? She looked up, tears welling. Your father, I mean, the man who raised you, he found out. He knew before I even told him. And he handled it. Handled it. I repeated, heart racing. What does that mean? Her voice cracked. He threatened him. Said if he didn't leave town within 48 hours, he'd destroy him. Professionally, legally, even physically. I couldn't speak. My brain was tripping over itself, trying to reconcile the quiet man in the recliner who watched war documentaries with the version she was describing now. A man who orchestrated someone's exile like a dictator purging the palace. He said no one would ever believe a man like Michael over a respected veteran. Said he'd make sure Michael lost everything if he stayed. And he meant it. My jaw clenched. And you let him do that? What choice did I have? She said, voice rising. I had a child. I had no money. And Michael didn't fight. He just left. So you stayed, I said, with a man who hated me. She nodded, eyes cast down. I thought if I showed loyalty, if I made it work, he'd come around. That he'd see you weren't a mistake. But he didn't, I said. She shook her head. No, he never did. A long silence stretched between us. Just the ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant sounds of traffic through the window. Then I asked the one question I'd been afraid to ask since I found the diary. Does he know? Michael, does he know I exist? She hesitated. Too long. He suspected, she said. But I never confirmed it. I didn't want to complicate his life. And when he left, I didn't know how to reach him. I figured it was better this way. Better for who? I whispered. She didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. That night, after she left, I sat in the dark with a bottle of bourbon and the diary in my lap. Not reading it, just holding it. Like it might tell me what to do next. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, I made a decision. I was going to find Michael Harrow. Because maybe, just maybe, the man who'd been erased from my life had something left to give. A truth. A connection. A piece of myself that wasn't soaked in guilt and silence. And if he didn't, then I'd bury it all. Once and for all. I didn't know where to start. Michael Harrow hadn't left a trail. At least, not one you could follow with a Google search and a last name. He was a ghost in the digital age. No Facebook, no LinkedIn, no obituaries. Just a faded high school yearbook photo and one archived newspaper article from 1994. Local mechanic leaves town amid scandal. That was it. A man folded into a rumor. But I couldn't let it go. I had to find him. I didn't care if he was a drunk in a desert shack or a banker with a new name. I needed to look him in the eye and ask the question that had been burning a hole in my chest since the funeral. Did you ever think about me? So I started with what I had. Old records. Paper trails. The kind of research you can't do from a couch. I took 3 days off work, drove 2 hours to the county clerk's office, and bribed an overworked clerk with coffee and a promise not to make her day harder than it already was. Michael Harrow, I said, lived here in the 90s, then vanished. She gave me a look. You and every true crime blogger want to know what happened to him. I smiled thinly. I'm not writing a podcast. I think he's my father. That changed her tone. She dug into the files and pulled what little she could. A few DMV change of address forms, a mechanic's license that expired in '95, an AP. box he used for 6 months after leaving town. Then she said something that lit a fuse in my brain. He forwarded mail to an address in Mesa, Arizona. I stared. Mesa? Yeah. After that, it stops. He either stopped forwarding or stopped caring. That night, I booked a flight. Mesa in August is a hell furnace, 110 degrees at midnight, the kind of heat that presses into your lungs and won't let go. I rented a car, drove to the address on the old forwarding form. It was a busted trailer parked behind a gas station, the kind of place where time forgets people and they forget each other right back. The woman who answered the door had a cigarette in one hand and a toddler clinging to her leg. Michael Harrow? I asked. She squinted at me. You the repo guy? No. Just looking for him. Haven't seen him in years, she said. But there's a guy 2 trailers down who used to know him. Red truck. You'll smell it before you see it. I followed her finger down the gravel path. Sure enough, the smell of motor oil and grilled onions hit before I even knocked. The guy who opened the door was leathery, shirtless, and looked like he'd wrestled more snakes than emotions. You looking for Mikey? He said. Mikey. The way he said it, casual, like Michael Harrow wasn't a ghost, but someone who still came by to borrow tools and bitch about the heat. You know him? I asked. Knew him, he said, stepping outside. Moved out to a farm north of Flagstaff. Name's different now. Goes by Mike Henson. Wife. Stepkids. Quiet life. Keeps to himself. My heart thudded in my chest. You got an address? The man looked me up and down. You the law? No. You family. I hesitated. I don't know yet. Something in my voice must have rung true, because he went back inside, scribbled an address on a beer carton, and handed it to me. Don't bring trouble, he said. He's had enough of that. The next morning, I was on the road. 6 hours through desert and pines, past empty highways and burnt-out fields. The closer I got, the heavier it felt, like every mile I drove was dragging some invisible chain behind me. And when I pulled onto the gravel driveway and saw the farmhouse, quiet and sun-bleached, something in me nearly broke. Because standing near the fence, feeding chickens, was a man in his late 50s. Gray around the temples, weathered. And when he turned toward me, I saw it. The same eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. Michael Harrow looked up, squinted, and the past came crashing into the present. He didn't recognize me, not at first. Just stood there with a scoop of feed in one hand and a wary expression carved deep into his face, like every wrinkle was a map of a road he didn't want to walk again. Can I help you? He asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. His voice hit me like static, familiar in a way I couldn't place until I realized I'd heard it before. Not in memory. In myself. I stepped closer. Are you Michael Harrow? He hesitated. A long beat. Then nodded slowly. Used to be, he said. Now I'm Mike Henson. What's this about? I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. I could hear the sound of chickens rustling behind him and the faint echo of a screen door creaking in the breeze. I think you knew my mother, I said. Back in Franklin. Early 90s. Her name was Diane. His face changed. Not dramatically. Not theatrically. Just cracked. The way ice does before it shatters. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just stood there like time had frozen around him. She had a son, I continued. Around the time you left town. He took a step back. I'm that son. Silence. Then he turned. Not to run. Not to hide. Just turned like his body couldn't hold itself up anymore. He sat down on an overturned feed bucket near the coop and stared at the dirt. I figured, he said quietly. I blinked. You figured. He nodded, not looking at me. I saw you once, he said. Years ago. Maybe you were 10? 11? Your mom brought you to a parade downtown. You were standing by the hot dog cart with her. I saw your face, and I knew. My heart punched my ribs. You didn't say anything, I whispered. He shook his head. I didn't have the right. You were my father. He looked up, finally. His eyes were rimmed red, but dry. I was the mistake. The one your mother wasn't supposed to make. I left so you wouldn't have to grow up with a scandal strapped to your back. That wasn't your call, I snapped. You let another man raise me. Hate me. For something I didn't even understand. He flinched at the word hate. Like I'd drawn blood. Did you ever try to reach out? I asked. He shook his head again. I wanted to. 100 times. I wrote letters I never mailed. Your mom said the best thing I could do was disappear. She was wrong, I said. A long, pained breath escaped him. I know that now. We sat in silence for a while. The breeze stirred dust across the yard. Somewhere, a wind chime clinked softly, too cheerful for the moment. I found your name in a diary, I said. The man who raised me wrote about you. About how he forced you out. About how I was a burden he tolerated. Mike closed his eyes. He told me I wasn't supposed to exist. I said, my voice cracking. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I read it out loud at his funeral. That made him look up again. Really look. Like he'd been hit with a spotlight. I didn't plan to, I said. But when I saw how everyone just buried the truth with him, I couldn't let it go. I had to be heard. His lips pressed together. A mixture of pride and shame flickered across his face. I'm not here to ruin your life, I added. I don't want anything from you. What do you want? He asked softly. I shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe to see if I was crazy for wondering all these years. Maybe to see if you'd slam the door in my face. He looked down, shook his head. I'm not slamming anything, he said. You're here. That means something. We sat there a while longer. Then he stood up and said the one thing I didn't expect. You want to come inside? Walking through that door was like stepping into an alternate timeline. The air smelled like coffee grounds and sawdust. A dog, some scruffy mutt with gray around the muzzle, looked up from the couch and gave a half-hearted wag. There were boots by the door, a stack of mechanic magazines on the table, and photos on the wall. Lots of them. None of me. He gestured toward the kitchen. You hungry? I shook my head. He poured 2 glasses of water anyway and sat across from me. I could see his hands trembling just slightly as he slid 1 glass across the table. I don't know what you want to ask, he said, but I'll answer whatever I can. No more running. I studied him for a second, the way his eyes flickered toward the hallway, like he was half expecting someone to interrupt, like he hadn't done this before. And maybe he hadn't. Maybe this was the first time he was looking his past in the face and not blinking. You married? I asked. He nodded. A woman named Lorna. Met her after I moved out here. She doesn't know about any of this. I raised an eyebrow. Not even that you had a son? She knows I made mistakes, he said. But not this one. That word again, mistake. Like I was some paperwork error in the ledger of his life. I clenched my jaw. I'm not looking to blow up your marriage, Mike. I'm not some ticking bomb. He looked at me, and for the first time since I arrived, his eyes softened. I don't think you are. I think you're a man who deserved better, and I'm sorry I wasn't it. That sat between us like a dropped hammer. I don't want apologies, I said finally. I want answers. Then ask. So I did. I asked him everything. Did he love my mother? Yes, fiercely, stupidly, against his better judgment. Why did he leave so easily? Because he thought staying would ruin us both, that being labeled that man in a small town was worse than vanishing. Did he know how bad it got? That the man who raised me weaponized silence like a scalpel? He said no. That part broke him. Sometimes, he said, cowardice wears a mask that looks like sacrifice. I sat back. That line hit harder than anything else he'd said. You're not what I expected, I admitted. Neither are you, he replied. But I can see you're mine. I don't need a test to prove it. Not sure if that's a compliment, I muttered. He chuckled, low and dry, like he hadn't laughed in a long time. It is. We sat there for over an hour. He told me about the years after he left, the aimless wandering, the jobs he took to keep moving, how he eventually stopped believing he'd ever deserve to know me. And then, just when I thought the night had given me everything it could, he stood, walked into the back room, and returned holding a box. He placed it gently in front of me. What is this? I asked. He swallowed hard. Every letter I ever wrote you, he said, but never sent. I didn't open the box. Not yet. I just stared at it. Why keep them? Because not sending them didn't mean I didn't feel it, he said. It just meant I didn't have the right. For the first time since I left that funeral, I felt something I couldn't name. Not forgiveness. Not peace. But maybe, just maybe, the start of a bridge. I stood to leave. I don't know if I'll come back, I said honestly. He nodded. I wouldn't blame you. But I'm glad I came. He looked like he wanted to say more, to ask something. But he didn't. He just walked me to the door, stood on the porch, and watched as I stepped into the night. As I drove away, I didn't feel closure. But I did feel something else. The weight of a secret finally put down. And the road ahead, stretching out in silence. I didn't go home right away. I pulled off the highway somewhere outside Prescott and checked into a cheap motel, the kind with vending machines that barely work and blackout curtains that don't fully close. The walls were thin, the sheets were stiff, but I didn't care. I just needed quiet. The box sat beside me on the bed, still unopened. Every time I reached for it, something in me pulled back. Fear, maybe, or the knowledge that once I opened it, I'd never be able to pretend again. Eventually, I did. Letter after letter, postmarked in different cities, dated across the years. Some were just a few lines, others pages long. The handwriting changed over time, steadier in the beginning, shakier in the middle, more resigned near the end. They started with "Dear Son." Always that. Never a name. Just Son. The first one was written a week after he left town. I'm not proud of today. I told myself I was doing the right thing, but it doesn't feel right. I miss you, and you don't even know me. That's the part that guts me. I kept reading. Some letters were angry. At himself, at my mother, at the man who replaced him. Others were hopeful, full of maybe one days, and imagined birthdays he knew he'd miss. I don't know what color your eyes are now. I bet they're dark. Like mine. If I could undo anything, it wouldn't be falling for your mom. It would be letting someone else define what kind of man I had to be. I heard you're in high school now. God, I hope you're taller than I was. I hope you're kind. I hope you don't carry my cowardice like a birthmark. By the time I got to the last letter, dated 5 years ago, my hands were shaking. If you're reading this, it means you found me. Or maybe I found the courage to send it. Either way, I want you to know, I never stopped thinking about you. Not once. Even when I tried. Especially then. I set the letter down and stared at the ceiling. There's a kind of grief that doesn't come with funerals, the grief of what could have been. The version of your life that might have existed if just one person had made a different choice. It's quieter than rage, but it cuts deeper. The next morning, I drove back to the farmhouse. He was on the porch again, sitting in the same spot, as if he'd been waiting. When he saw me, he stood. "You came back," he said. "I read them," I replied. His eyes searched mine. "And I don't forgive you," I said. He nodded, slowly. "I wouldn't either. But I want to know more," I added. "About you. About everything." He didn't speak, just stepped aside and opened the door. "That was 6 months ago. We don't call it rebuilding. That feels too clean. Too final. We're just learning. We talk once a week. Sometimes in person. Sometimes not. He met my wife. He met my kids. He cried when my daughter called him grandpa by accident. And when I asked him, recently, why he kept the letters all those years without sending a single one, he said something that stuck with me. Because I didn't think I deserved to speak. But I hoped, if the day ever came, I'd at least have something worth saying. I don't know what's next for us. We're not tied together by years of memories. We don't have old fishing trips to laugh about or holiday traditions to fall back on. But we have something else now. A truth, laid bare. And for the first time in my life, it feels like enough. The first time he came to my place, I almost canceled. I don't know why. Maybe I thought seeing him in my space, the home I built, the one filled with things he had no part in, would make everything feel more real, more final. But he showed up early. Knocked twice. No hesitation. When I opened the door, he smiled like a man who still wasn't sure if he was allowed to. My daughter ran past me in a blur of glitter and crayons. "Grandpa Mike," she shouted. He froze. My wife appeared in the hallway, gave me a questioning look. "It's okay," I said quietly. "Let her." He crouched slowly, knees cracking like dry sticks, and she threw herself into his arms. Just like that. No explanations. No decades of silence. No shame. Only acceptance. And God help me, that almost broke me. We sat outside after dinner. Just the two of us. The kids were inside watching a movie. My wife cleared dishes while pretending not to eavesdrop through the screen door. He sipped a beer, staring at the backyard. "You've got a good life," he said. "I built it," I replied. "From the ground up." He nodded. "I can see that." There was a pause. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest like a stone for weeks. "Do you think we'll ever be normal?" He took a long breath. "I don't know what normal means anymore. But I think we can be real. And maybe that's better." We sat in silence for a bit. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn envelope. No address. Just my name. "What's this?" I asked. "A letter I wrote last week," he said. "But this one, I actually want you to read." I opened it that night after he left. It was short. Just a few lines. "You don't owe me forgiveness. You don't owe me anything. But every time you let me show up, even a little, you give me a life I thought I lost. Thank you for letting me try. I'll never ask for more. But I'll always hope you keep letting me show up." I folded the letter and slipped it into the same box he once gave me. Not to hide it, but to remember. Because sometimes the real story doesn't end with revenge or a reckoning. Sometimes it ends with a door opening, quietly, without conditions, and a father, once lost, finally learning how to be found. The last time I visited the cemetery, it wasn't for closure. It was for clarity. I stood there, same black marble headstone, same two-manicured grass, same brass plaque etched with the name of the man who raised me but never really knew me. The man whose will erased me, but whose diary had set me free. The urn was buried now, tucked beneath a stone that read, "Beloved husband, devoted father, veteran, man of honor." I stared at that word, father, and all I could think was, you had the chance. You just never took it. I didn't come to yell, didn't come to curse him. I came to say something I couldn't say when I stood at that podium weeks ago, fire in my gut and fury in my voice. I came to say, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. Because I don't want to carry this anymore. This legacy of silence, of second-guessing, of wondering why love came with conditions and presence came with a price. I laid the letter down on the stone. Just a short one. My own words this time. You were wrong about me. I wasn't a mistake. I was just the part of your story you didn't know how to hold. But I've learned to hold myself. And I'm done waiting for a father who never showed up. Then I walked away. And I didn't look back. The holidays came a month later. Mike, still Mike, not Dad, not yet, brought over a box of mismatched ornaments. Ones from his childhood. Ones he'd picked up over the years, never thinking he'd have a tree worth decorating. We let the kids hang them, crooked and chaotic, next to our own. And when my daughter hung one that said, "World's Best Grandpa," I saw the way his hands trembled, just a little. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I still think about the diary. Sometimes I reread it. Not to punish myself. To remind myself how far I've come. Because that man's words once defined my worth. Now they're just ink on old paper. And the story I'm writing now? It's my own. It's messy. It's honest. And most of all, it's real.